We all seek to belong. It's part of the hierarchy of needs. If you've ever moved schools, and all international educators have done so at least once, then you know how challenging the transition can be. That feeling of not being sure where you belong can be overwhelming at times. At some stage, you may even have thought, I'm really struggling here. I wonder if other people feel this way or if I'm the only one. Or maybe, I wonder if there's a more effective way to manage all these changes. Even if you haven't been the one to leave, you may have gone through a hard time when a close friend or colleague left your school and asked yourself, what could I have done to ease this loss? Well, wonder no more. There's a tried and true framework available for schools to follow. It's based on the Safe Passage Across Networks program, also known as SPAN, developed by Dr. Douglas Oda during his time at the International School of The Hague. In this two-part interview, we were fortunate to speak with some folks who have worked with SPAN and who have also developed a student ambassador program guide that lays out a plan for including students in the process of setting up a safe passage system to provide care for those transitioning in and out of any school, and even for those who are staying. The guiding question for the show was, how can schools build or enhance a student ambassador program rooted in positive transitions care? Our guests, Amy Shuflin and Lina Paumgarten, offered a wealth of content information and practical strategies to support transitions for all members of your school community. They had so much to share that we recorded 2 shows with them. In this first episode, they shared an overview of the Safe Passage Across Networks, or SPAN, program, a description of how the SPAN program supports community arrivers, leavers, and stayers, reasons why international schools need a transitions care program, and practical strategies for transition support. In the second show, we'll focus on their SPAN Student Ambassador Guide. Check out our show notes to learn more about Amy and Lina's backgrounds and to access the resources mentioned in this episode. This episode was recorded on July 13th, 2025. I'm pretty confident that after listening to this show and hearing what these 2 very caring individuals have to offer, you will be moved to buy Doug Oda's book, as well as Amy and Lina's guide, and start advocating for a transitions care program at your school.
Well, hello, Lina and Amy. Welcome to the Educators Going Global podcast. Thanks for meeting with us today, and we're psyched to start talking about transitions. Let's start with you, Lina. Where are you?
Hi, I am currently in Vienna, Austria. Thank you so much for having us here today.
How about you, Amy?
I am at the moment in Chicago in the United States. Thanks so much for having us here.
Most excellent. All right, as we always do, we do a Going Global story sharing a little bit about being an international educator. Amy, why don't we start with you? Do you have a story for us?
My Going Global story is that I have been a stayer for most of my years. I spent the first 10 years in one place, and that one place was Venezuela, and I had lots of people coming and going in my 10 years. And then after 10 years, we moved to a new school, and on the first day we landed, we went on a tour of the school with the head of school. And as we walked around the school, he kept talking about our school. And I kept saying, your school. And towards the end of the tour, he stopped me and he was like, Amy, this is your school too. And honestly, at that moment, I just wasn't ready. I had spent the last 10 years in one place, and I had taken only 3 weeks to move from that place to the new place. And I was very much grieving and completely in denial that I was in a new place. And so it was really hard to be told that the new place was mine, and to feel like it wasn't okay to feel sad about that, or that I didn't feel like a belonging yet. So I think for me as a stayer in my years, to be in a community where I didn't feel like those new stayers for me were ready to accept me made it really challenging. It took a lot longer, I think, for me to find a settled place in that new place.
That's a mini case study right there. as one goes through that initial arriving to join a community. And we're going to be using some terminology around being an arriver, a leaver, a stayer. Lina, how about you?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think both of our stories are about arriving somewhere new, given the topic that we're talking about today is very fitting. One of my favorite quotes is by Brene Brown that says, "Belonging is about being accepted for who you are, while fitting in is about changing yourself to be accepted." And the story that I'd like to tell is just how different the transition welcome can feel. So I moved to one of my new schools, and I was greeted not by one person, but literally parents, kids, staff members across the board at that school with a version of the words, "Welcome, wow, what big shoes you've got to fill," because of who I was replacing. And this other school that I moved to, again, across the board, parents, staff members, kids, a version of, "We're so glad you're here. We've been waiting for you for so long." And to me, that's fascinating because of how I felt in that arrival space that I was in. It matters what you say. It matters how you greet people. And it's the same with how you say goodbye to people. And it's also the same in terms of how you help and make people feel valuable in a community. And those are the stayers. And that belonging, it comes back to this quote from Brene Brown, how it's about finding belonging and feeling belonging, not just fitting in.
And that makes you think, wouldn't it be great if someone wrote a book about
definitely.
transitions? And wouldn't that be so helpful if there was an organization out there that could help educators and families understand how to handle transitions? That would be super. And wouldn't it be helpful if someone did a podcast on this important topic?
Yes, definitely.
What do you say, Audrey?
Well, yeah, I think that's an awesome idea. Let's go for it, David, shall we? No, the book is really helpful, and all of that wonderfully has happened. So here we are with a couple of people who have connections with that organization, and we're really excited to have you ladies here today. And thank you for sharing those stories. I really felt for both of you when you were talking about the difficulty of going to a place and not feeling like you belonged right away, or Lina, with the big shoes, like that just sounds so difficult. So I'm glad that you both are helping pay it forward and helping people learn better ways to receive new people. And also just that sensitivity to how hard it is, even for adults. This isn't just about students. This is also about anybody arriving new at a school in the community. I mean, this would include parents too. So just opening people's minds to the idea that transition is hard for everybody. So, fittingly, our guiding question: how can schools build or enhance a student ambassador program rooted in positive transitions care? And we're going to head into the supporting questions on that so we can stay somewhat focused. So, you've both been involved with the SPAN program, Safe Passage Across Networks. Please give us an overview of what that is, and we'll start with Amy, and then Lina, you can add your 2 cents.
SPAN, or Safe Passage Across Networks, is a community of volunteers committed to healthy transitions and attachment security. Any school that has a high degree of turnover is impacted by transitions, regardless of a person's role. Like you said, Audrey, if it's a student, a parent, or a staff person, they all experience being new, like an arriver, a stayer, or a leaver. This is true also if it's not just the kid moving away, also the kid who stays put or the adult who stays put. You're also experiencing the people coming and going. Most programs, though, that exist to address this have existed in isolation. So it's like one person at a school that cares about this and is doing something about it. And then that person leaves. And so then the whole program usually ends with them. So the whole idea for SPAN came about from a gentleman named Doug Oda and several other people that were founding members for the SPAN, for the steering committee in 2017. They met at a FIGT, Families in Global Transition Conference, and talked about this vision for creating a home for collaboration, specifically so that best practices in research could be used to identify like how to support and connect international schools to best meet those needs. So for that reason, SPAN came about to support international schools. They've created community. They have the award-winning monthly meeting that we've had called The Nest, where anybody can come. It's free, and just to get together and chat and talk about different transitions-related issues. And then it allows for great networking opportunities. Like I've talked to all sorts of people just because we met through The Nest, sharing best practices, and then best practices in symposiums and hearing inspirational speakers. But SPAN is really out there to try to create connection, equip people to build that community so that the people who are in isolation like me, when I started, actually, I was at a talk that Chris O'Shaughnessy gave at International School Counselor Association, and Ruth Van Raken was on the call, and she's like one of the authors of the TCK book, right? So I was a big nerd about that, and she was in the room, and I think I stopped paying attention to anything anybody else was doing because I was like, Ruth is here. Oh my goodness.
Fangirling.
So yes, I really was. I started texting my friends being like, I'm in a room with Ruth Van Raken. And it was all online. And then afterwards, my friend's like, you need to message her. So I messaged her. And then she's so kind and wonderful. And she's such a amazing mentor. And so she just spent time with me because I was going through that really hard transition. She spent time with me over the next year, just like helping me. And she then was like, you need to join SPAN because she's on the board. And she's like, these are your people. And when I went, it was like, for the first time in so long where I was like, oh, I don't feel crazy anymore. There's a bunch of people out there who are just like me, who like really care about this and know it matters, because unfortunately, a lot of times when you do transitions care work, you can be like the one person who's really loudly saying, hey, it matters that we take care of new people, or it matters that we say goodbye. And these are all things that most people really love to avoid.
Yes.
Or they get really burnt out from. So it's like being with people who can continue to care about this together, like, okay, it's worth it. And then you can hear and learn from each other and be able to, that's really the point of SPAN, is to help the transitions care provider to have that community and to be able to learn how to do things better and grow so that the transitions care where they're at can really be better.
I'm so glad you got connected with them and that you realized that you had found your people. And, that again comes back to the whole belonging. You can belong in a virtual space as well, which is awesome. And I love that Ruth Van Raken welcomed you and took the time, spending the time with you, because that again is walking the whole talk. And that's such a great story. Thank you. Lina, what's your involvement with SPAN?
So I'm going to actually take it back a notch. Something that Amy mentioned, the book, the TCK book, that actually comes before SPAN. And also a sentence that Amy said is a sentence I said when I was 19 years old. I finally don't feel crazy. It was when I first read the TCK book, which is by Pollock and Van Raken. And Pollock is no longer alive, and Van Raken is. So Van Raken is still very involved with SPAN and comes to all these webinars. And it's amazing to chat with her and to actually talk to one of the authors that changed my life as a 19-year-old.
Wow. So you're a fangirl too.
Yeah, I am. And part of it is being a third culture kid, but having parents that are not third culture kids. And so they didn't understand that experience. And so part of it was, and back then in the 90s, people didn't talk about transitions in that way. So I really did feel crazy until I understood, oh, I'm a third culture kid. These are my people. And now where it doesn't matter what your background is, I meet a TCK, I instantly feel a connection. And that's what it is with SPAN. It doesn't matter if that person has actually lived their whole life in one place, but if they are involved with SPAN, they understand the TCK experience, and so you have an instant connection there. And that, to me, is what SPAN is in reality in terms of practice, what the TCK book was for me in terms of opening up a world of belonging and accepting that I didn't know existed until I was given that book into my hands. So that's what I wanted to add based off of what Amy shared. And my experience with SPAN has been more on the side of the receiving end, right? Being involved with webinars, I gave one or two talks, but more it was being on the receiving end of some of the things that they share. It's just, there's so much wisdom there. There's so many resources there. You can choose what you want to use and how you want to use it. And so really what I wanted with SPAN was to be able to give what my experience at a specific international school had created. And I'm glad that we were able to make that happen.
So one thing that strikes me about how you talk about this network and the welcoming, the feeling supported, that everybody gets at peace. And then Amy talking about how you could end up being the only one in a place that is saying that as loudly as you can. And also that when people leave a place, if you're the one person and you leave the place, the program may not continue. We recently did a podcast with Jim Reese who talks about making change stick. And so I wonder if that's something maybe that could be looked at, some of his ideas, or has been looked at in terms of helping get a SPAN program to be sticky or sustainable, even if you leave a place, to feel like you've left it in good hands, so to speak. So just something
Can I add
throw
to
out
that?
there.
An example of that would be little traditions. So having left my last school, I can still see the traditions that have been kept, whether it's for the leaving seniors, the goodbyes, for the people arriving. There's still so much growth that's happening, new things that they're creating, which is amazing because that's part of what this program allows for, is creativity and growth. And you don't have to stick to the same old. If you allow for it to be student-led, then it allows for all kinds of things to be created within a year. But you do see it sticking, using your word, the stickiness of it, when you look at what are the traditions that they bring back every year, like how they say goodbye to seniors, or how they say goodbye to students, or how to welcome people, like those things that, but that's a tradition. We do that at this school. And the funny thing is, a lot of the things that the ambassadors at my last school created hadn't existed before. But in a decade, it's now become tradition.
So getting the students in there.
I think another piece in that is Doug's book, Safe Passage, is really all about that very idea of making things last, and really the idea of like a transitions care team, that it needs to be so many different parts of a school involved so that it doesn't die with a person, that it doesn't depend on just a person, because it should be the school counselor, the teachers, the admissions, like every part of the school should have a hand in welcoming and in saying goodbye and in caring for people as they come, and have that perspective. And that's really what makes transitions care really stick, is like the more people, the more you educate on just this. Honestly, it's this whole idea of drift. When we go into a school, we are an arriver. And it kind of, you think about it as like going into the water. Like if you go into the ocean and you walk into the beach at one point and you look up at the shore and you see like, all right, I'm by this one tree or building, wherever you're at, and then you're in the water, you've entered in that spot, you've like arrived, right? So, but then as you swim in the ocean for a while, you like turn around and you're like, oh, I'm not at the same spot anymore. I have drifted. And a lot of times that experience of going from a arriver to a stayer is not really one that is like as obvious. It's felt. It's like it's more like you experience it. It's kind of like seasickness. You like lose that sort of like, you can feel the motion, but you can't always see it. But then eventually you're going to move from being the stayer to leaving. Like you're going to find like, now I'm exiting. And it's that's the experience of everybody. If you let everybody know that from the beginning, it makes such a difference, because if you're new and you're coming into your school and everybody's saying, hey, I see that you're new. Tomorrow you're going to be like, next day or who knows when, you're going to be a stayer, and then at some point you're going to be a leaver. And we're all in these different places. So if we can acknowledge that, if we can see that that's the norm that we experience, and that's okay. It's okay for people to be new. It's okay for people to leave, and that's expected, that we are going to honor that. We're going to acknowledge it. It's okay to talk about it. That's really the way that you create a community that can actually address this issue long term, that it's not just on the one person. I mean, I've seen it just in where I'm at. I had to leave my position where I was at in the school and start like creating change from the outside, But now being able to see like other people in my school were able to take the Laws of Transitions course that SPAN provided and to be involved in the different things and to do the learning. Now I'm seeing people that previously did not like it at all. If I talked about transitions care, they're now talking about it as if we've always done it and it was always the way. So it's like this exciting thing though, to see like, if you just make these small changes sometimes to just talk about it as like, this is normal, this is our experience, it really can create quite a shift in your community to be able to then actually really take care of the arriver, the stayer, and the leaver, because all of that matters. You have to acknowledge all three.
I love that.
And partner, as always, you and I are on the same page as I was scribbling over here to bring up Jim's episode. That's episode 81, by the way. And from reading Doug's book a ways back and hearing what you're all saying, what we're talking about is how does one bring this transition care program into one school? And you've offered some very helpful ways to do that. And I think for our listeners, if you read Jim's article about the 4 legs of change, you get into the people leadership leg, you get into the structures and systems leg, which I heard Lina talking about, and you get into the institutional, embedding the program into the DNA of the school. And I did want to say, as an instructional technologist, some words that come to mind are that you want to integrate the principles of SPAN, and then you want them to diffuse out into the community. So I would definitely go to Jim and Dr. Perkins' article and listen to our show, our episode on how to implement a new program while embedding it into your school community. And just like you were saying, Amy, it's not centered just on a couple people who make this happen. It becomes a part of just the way you do things at your school. So, folks, think about that and read Doug's Safe Passage book. Let's unpack the terminology a little bit more. Lina, could you start the process of going over what it means to be an arriver, a leaver, and a stayer? As Amy just noted, we sometimes don't think about the stayers, but they're just as big a part of this as anyone else. So, Lina, please unpack these terms a bit more.
If we keep it on simple terms, I really love the metaphor, the imagery that Amy created of like going to the beach, getting into the water, being drifted, and then coming back out again. So just imagining in transitions, we all go through different transitions, changes in our lives. There's a beginning phase to that. Then there's a being in the middle of it all phase. And then there's an ending phase to that when you're leaving it. And that can be with going from elementary school to middle school, from middle school to high school, from being a senior in high school to college, from being single to being in a relationship to moving in to getting married to not having children, suddenly having children, your first child versus 2 children versus more. I don't have kids, but having a dog, that was probably one of the hardest transitions for me, was suddenly having this being that I'm responsible for, and I can't just go work out when I want to go work out. Like, that was a really hard transition for me. And it wasn't at all related to being at an international school. I was on a sabbatical. So I think understanding, and Amy saying, like, acknowledging, being able to say, wow, like this transition, Audrey, you said transitions are hard. And some are easier, and some things make it easier. And definitely under the list of things that make it easier is having people you can process with and connect with and can remind yourself you're not crazy when things feel hard or when things feel impossible. And then also humor, I think, is so important. Being able to say, like, when I lived in the Netherlands, it's not possible is like the typical quotes, right? Or like whatever it is, like even, when I lived in Chile, like people saying, oh yeah, in Chile, this is, whatever it is, there's cultural things, and if the local people can help laugh about it and you can laugh about it, that also makes it easier, right? So arrivers or new people coming in, oftentimes some people call them the newbies. You want to be careful what words you use so that they don't just get pinned as that's who they are. So arrivers are the people that are coming new to a community, usually at an international school. And one of the things when we look at not just students, but also families and staff members, I've also seen, unfortunately, at some schools where a big deal is made for the international staff, but the new people that come in that are from that country that already have a home there but are new to the school community don't get that same welcome or that same introduction or the same support. And that can be extremely hard because they see what the others are getting. So it creates a divide there as well, right? So the arrivers are the people coming new into a community and the support that's needed there. And the leavers are people who are leaving a community. And that community can be defined by as an international school, but can also be like the middle school community. You're leaving the middle school community and going into the high school community, or, fill in the blank. You're leaving the counseling department and you're going to go work in the language arts department. Like, that's leaving a community. That's a transition. And then the stayers are the ones that are the community that you're going into or that you're leaving. And oftentimes we forget about the stayers because actually those are the people being left behind. And they're the people that we're asking, you always need to welcome the new people. So there's a lot of responsibility put on the stayers that we often ignore. And there's a lot of support we want to put in place. And specifically with kids, I personally think giving them the opportunity to take on leadership roles. I obviously work with high school kids, but leadership, opportunity to impact their community positively. Stayers are the ones that really can do a lot for their community in that regard.
I just want to jump on the stairs for 1 second. I'll never forget, at one of my schools, there was a woman who was new to international teaching, and she said to me at the end of her first year, "Oh my gosh, I became really close with this other teacher, and we spent so much time together." They were teaching colleagues and friends, and now she's just gone. And she wasn't prepared for that at all. And that really struck me that, the stayers have it tough too. You're not saying goodbye to as many people all at once. You're still maybe saying goodbye to some people with whom you've become very close. And it is a feeling of being left behind, absolutely, like you said. Thank you for those definitions. Do you want to add anything, Amy?
Yeah, just to flesh out, I think it's good to think like Doug talks about in his book, Safe Passage, the thinking about the student, the parent, and the staff as the three groups. And so just thinking about those arrivers, that you can have a new student who is having to learn a language or a completely new culture, who has a new parent who could be single and on their own, possibly for the first time, and not know how anything works and be there just for their child and have no community as well. And so their big focus is all about their child. And then the other piece is then the teacher, who's could be brand new and just in the classroom trying to do their best, but like has a lot of expectations on them. And maybe their home is not even like done yet and they don't know where to eat. And so there's so many like base needs that are not being met there. And they're expected, whether it's the student who's like got to do good in school and totally new language or a new culture, and a parent who's got to figure out how to live, and then a teacher who's got to figure out how to teach and be successful. Like all that is happening all there with the arrivers. And then the other part of it is that in international school, most of the time, though there are times that it is more normal to leave or arrive, there is always people coming and going throughout the year. So these are not like set times when these are all happening. So it's terrible to be then a leaver when everyone's arriving, or terrible to be an arriver when everyone's leaving, or what it feels like. Your experience doesn't get acknowledged. But then you have the leavers, oftentimes like the big leaving that'll get celebrated will be the seniors where they're graduating. But what about the 11th grade kid who's like, now he's got to go someplace else and he doesn't get the big graduation that he was looking forward to? Or the teacher who's like, suddenly something has changed and now they have to leave, but their leaving is now in the midst of all these other celebrations. And so their own processing doesn't happen. Or the parent who's like has a full community they finally made there, but there's no tradition to say goodbye to them. There's like nobody who's acknowledging that they're even leaving, like maybe a couple of friends. So then you have all those. And then in the midst of all that, you have the stayers who like could have just lost all their people. And now they all their community that they know and feel settled with is gone. And now they have a bunch of new people coming in and they have to figure out how to carry on. And whether that's citizen staff or expat staff, because like the citizen staff can oftentimes have that sort of like, as well as expat staff who stay long, that bitterness that builds up from being a stayer. It's like, I'm tired of welcoming you. I'm tired of taking care of the new things that you need. Like, I'm tired of trying to explain things. But that's why it's so important that the stayer keep participating in in the TCK book, we talk about rafting. People really get tired of talking about it. And I, even as someone who like talks about this all the time, is that I also really struggle with it sometimes because it is really hard to keep saying goodbye. I mean, it does really tax us to like, I mean, in the 10 years I spent in Venezuela, it was a tiny school and I don't even know the number of staff because there was like people left before their contracts were up because it was such a hard place to live. So I don't even know the amount of goodbyes I had. I was like recounting them the other day with somebody and like, we couldn't remember them. They're listing different people. I was like, oh, I forgot about that person. But like, it's just so hard. And so it's so then more important that a stayer participate in the goodbyes and the hellos and that their experience gets acknowledged. Because I think that's really like the arriver with all that newness, the leaver with all their feelings, and that they're living in one place, but also starting to live in another. Like they're experiencing both of those things. And then the stayers all in the middle. So I just think that each of these is like, that's why there's a drift that goes from one to the other, but that they're unique. They're really important to be acknowledged, but amongst all of them, that there has to be lots of crossover. There needs to be a lot of opportunity for each person to hear the other person's experience. I think, anyways, that's a broader way of looking at each of the groups and the way that they impact each other, what's going on.
Amy, thank you for sharing that, and Lina from the practitioner point of view as well. And for our listeners who aren't a part of the SPAN network and maybe are not taking on transition understanding and perspectives as much as they could, I think that really painted the picture pretty powerfully right there. And one of the things, back to you, Lina, as a counselor, we start off so much of our work with individuals, whether it's a teacher, a student, an administrator, a parent, where we're focusing on what their needs are. Especially as new people come in and we're talking about their basic needs, which include their housing, transportation, security, that feeling a sense of belonging, etc. As we move up the hierarchy of needs, that we really understand their perspective so that we can better understand how we can support them. So I just wanted to add that as a tool for people working through helping newcomers, stayers, and leavers.
Well, I appreciate that you brought up RAFT. We did have a guest on who talked about RAFT and went through what it stands for. Maybe you could just repeat that quickly, but also maybe you could explain it in terms of something that had not occurred to me is a RAFT process for a stayer. I never thought about that. What would that look like? And maybe you can say what the RAF and T mean just quickly. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So RAFT stands for reconciliation, which is to have a clean slate, to forgive, be forgiven. Affirmation is the A, so letting people know what they mean to you. Farewell, saying goodbye to people, places, pets, things, all the stuff. And then the T is to think destination, think about where you're headed. I like to think about it as think about what's going to be there and what's not going to be there. So over the years, as I worked with students, whether it was in Venezuela or now Malaysia, we started adapting the RAFT model to not, like I have a journal that I have students go through. The first question is to orient themselves about where they are at on the map, right? Like what's happening? What's happening in your situation right now? What's going on? Are you moving? Why are you moving? Are you staying? Who's leaving you? Whatever that is that's describing where you're at now so you can get a good picture for yourself, what's going on. And then walking through each of the steps, and we would lay it out as like, here's where you answer if you're a leaver, and here's where you answer if you're a stayer. So just being able to think through each of those pieces, okay, like I'm a stayer, but I need to reconcile, because that's a really easy thing in international community to avoid completely. Like nobody wants to do that. You're like, you're leaving. I'm going to skip this conflict. Like, who cares? You're out of here.
See ya.
Yeah. So, but that's so much baggage that we like weigh down ourselves with. And I can think about so many times where then you go to the next place and you meet someone and, oh man, that person really reminds me of that last person. I really didn't like that last person. So now I don't like you. So it just carries with you. So how do you make a clean slate? And all the ways that you can do that, even if someone has left suddenly, like just for yourself, like writing a letter you're never going to send, right? Just to like ask for forgiveness or to forgive, to let things go. And then the same thing for I think a lot of load for rafting oftentimes goes on the leaver, but if the stayer also recognizes that they have a part in it, oftentimes then they won't have as much regret. They won't like overload the leaver in the last week, because we're always avoiding goodbyes as much as we can. And so, but then that's really overwhelming for the person who's leaving, because they have all these details as well as a million people coming out of the woodwork to try to say goodbye to them. And so I try to do it as early as possible. Like, okay, as soon as I know that somebody's leaving, just letting them know. And even if it's not like taking the time to write the letters, although that for me works better because I'm not always good with my words in the moment. But if I'm with a person and I know they're leaving me, I'm in a moment where I'm like on a walk with them or we're out to coffee. I will interrupt them and be like, I'm really sad that you're leaving. I really like you. Like, I really like that we have this time together. So I think that doing that as a stayer, like taking advantage of those moments. Lina, do you want to say something?
I'm loving what you're saying. And I had something you said, I'm not sure quite what it was, but something you said sparked this idea. It's a little bit of a crazy idea, but no one really ever is a stayer, because we're all kind of arriving or leaving with something in our lives. And the word stayer only becomes a thing when you say that the arriving and the leaving is pertaining to moving to or leaving a country or the school. Then you're a stayer if you're not one of those things. But you're still an arriver or a leaver when it comes to going into a new class, having to find new friends because your group of friends just broke up. You were in a relationship and that just ended. Like, yep. There's just constant transition in our lives. You're actually never really a full-on stayer in everything in your life at all times, if you really think about it. And so what you were saying, Audrey, about the raft and practicing it for ourselves when we're stayers, if you perceive it as, well, I'm not actually always a stayer. I'm not going to have this English teacher next year. These are my last few weeks with this English teacher, and I really like this English teacher. Or, man, this teacher really pushed my buttons, and I also don't want to leave things bad with them. That doesn't feel right for me. So I'm just going to let them know that, we had a tough year, but I also learned a lot and kind of clear it out. And that's not at such a big level of like leaving the country and maybe never ever seeing each other again, but that's also changed because of the world we live in that's so global today. You're going to most likely at some point bump into someone you really didn't think you would again. And that might be that teacher that you hoped you would never see again. And there you are. I kid you not. My brother's physics teacher was standing in the bus at an airport once that we were both transitioning between flights. Like, that's how small the world can be. So I wanted to add that piece, and like, let's not think that the arriver and the leaver are only people coming into the community and leaving the community. In fact, we all are arriving, leaving with something, and the staying piece is just a convenience thing. We're needing to use raft a lot more in our lives in terms of how we interact with each other.
Yeah, I think that the other thing with the farewell piece for the stayer is a lot of just the recognizing that things, like Lina said, they don't stay the same. So I know in my 10 years, like every year we were eating at a different restaurant regularly. So there was like, and then things close. And so even as a stayer, just like recognizing that. And then as a stayer, you also end up with a lot of people's stuff, because part of like the farewells is people giving you their stuff.
So true.
And so I know at one point I looked around my home and I was like, I think almost nothing in here belongs to me, really. It's all been given to me at some point. Like, someone gave me I even had a friend who gave me like a car air freshener, because every time I got in her car, I was like, oh, your car smells so good. Like, so she was like, here's your gift. And I was like, honestly, I know that's so silly, but I felt really seen in that moment, because I was like, okay, because in Venezuela, it was hard to find those things, and, the streets smelled bad. So I was like, yay, my car smells better. So that was just like being a part of recognizing that's like the farewells, that things change for you even as a stayer. And then a big piece we talk about with Think Destination for Stayers is thinking about what's still here. We talk a lot about, like, I found this little activity one time that was all about making a treasure chest. And so I had my students we broke up between leavers and stayers, and I had the stayers all sit down and we talked about like what still exists here that is precious to us. And so like we kind of like drew it out and we made our own treasure chest of like the people who are still here that are really going to stay and that are important to us, or the places in the community, foods, things that we really like that are here that we really enjoy and treasure. And then what we did was we kind of took those and said, like, when new people come, this is what we can share with them. We want to be able to share these treasures with new people as they arrive, so that they know that they can go to this person, or this is the best teacher to go to for this thing, or this is the lady in the office. She knows all the best places to get whatever. And so I think that's another way for a stayer to raft, is to think about like what's still here with me, to recognize that, as well as thinking about like, these are the things that are leaving. So how do I prepare myself? How do I help myself plan? Or if I have to, especially with students who are really, really close with people, or I had siblings who were really close and then their siblings leaving, we talk a little about, as the stayer, how are you going to plan when you're going to connect with that person who's gone now, if that's something you want to keep doing? And then how do you also have grace for the fact that that person's about to live in a completely new place with a lot of new things? And so for a while there, it's going to be really hard to like regularly connect with that person. So how do you have empathy and grace? There's a book that I love that's a children's book that's called My Life Without Nico. It's all about the experience of a child. There's two best friends and they do everything together. And then one day, Nico finds out that his dad has got to go do some classes in Australia for a year. So it's just a year. They do come back together, but Nico leaves. And so then the girl who's still there, she's experiencing this hole in her life. And so she's kind of talking about how this hole kind of like, it's boring. It keeps her from things. She doesn't have space for other people. It feels uncomfortable. But then eventually she kind of like lets in, first it's a cat, and then it's playing the piano, and then it's a friend. And so then she's got that kind of that hole isn't as present anymore. But then Nico comes back and she worries about having space for Nico now that she's filled up her life again. But she kind of talks about like, no, I do have space. Like I do have space for this is bigger. I can grow. And I really liked that because it's a very simplistic picture of that real experience of like the loss, and then how to kind of open yourself back up again as the stayer to new things, and how to do that a little bit at a time. So anyways, I think that is like a good way to think about rafting, not just for the leaver, but for the stayer as well.
Thank you so much for that explanation. That really helps me to understand rafting for stayers. So, raft is a beautiful example of a way that a school can intentionally look at transitions. Maybe you could take a minute to tell us a little bit more about the need specifically for a transitions care program in international schools. Amy, let's start with you.
Okay. So Doug, in his book, Safe Passage, he talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the bottom, we have all the basic needs for safety, security, food, all those sorts of really essential needs. In the middle, you have all your psychological needs, belonging, self-esteem, love. And up at the top, you have self-actualization, risk-taking. International schools are filled with, for the most part, students who have those base needs met. And we ask students, almost always at international schools, to go for the top, like self-actualize, take risks, be a leader, global change. And then in the middle is all these just blank space. They don't have belonging. They don't not know. There's like the lack of self-esteem. When you talk about just transition experience, there's like none of that. And so we're asking them to go and jump this just huge level without meeting those middle needs. So transitions care program at international schools is all about recognizing and meeting those middle needs that students, for them to learn, for parents to parent well, and teachers to teach well, we all need to be able to feel safe, secure, seen, known, right? We need all that in the middle. And so if we want, as international schools, for all those people to do well, we have to intentionally meet those needs in the middle, recognize that they exist, that they're a need, and that we need to support them. That's what transitions care programs are all about in international schools. It's just recognizing that middle need.
And I'll jump in. You can tell very quickly when a school has a strong support program, whether it's for students that are arriving, leaving, or being left behind, or if it's the parents that are arriving, leaving, being left behind, or the staff that are arriving, leaving, or being left behind. In fact, we all need a welcoming hand and an embrace when we arrive somewhere new, and that welcome has to happen before you leave your old place. So when you don't know where you're going to, often people really struggle with that transition because they're in limbo. If you already know where you're going to and you've already received a welcome email from a buddy that's saying, I'm so excited that you're moving here and it's going to be so great. What questions do you already have? And if you don't worry about it. We'll deal with it when you're here. But already that reaching out beforehand is a step in the guide that we're going to be talking about in the next episode. But you are allowing that person to prepare. When we talk about raft, think destination. What are some of the things that are going to cause me anxiety? So the best way to arrive is in your goodbye to have already started your arrival. When you're preparing to leave a place, it's an amazing opportunity to learn what impact you had on that community. And of course, for the people being left behind, for them, it's so important to have purpose and grounding and a community, an opportunity to positively impact the community that they're in meaningfully. So when you have an intentional transitions care program, all those three levels of arriving, of leaving and staying, and the parents, the staff, the students have a place. And there's a purpose. And there's impact. And it's meaningful. And when we go back to that quote that I shared, my favorite quote at the beginning with Brene Brown, belonging is about being accepted for who you are, while fitting in is about changing yourself to be accepted. The Intentional Transitions Care Program is all about that.
I also am a big lover of Brene Brown. And so that's a wonderful place to end this episode. We really learned a lot. So we want to thank you both for spending the time sharing with us. And we would like to give people the opportunity to learn a little bit more about what you're talking about. If you could share with us how people might follow you if they want to learn more about your work. And let's start with Amy.
You can find me on LinkedIn, as well as my blog that I've started is findingmyvoice.amy.shuflin.com. And you can also just go to the spanschools.org website and find me there to see the resources, become a member, be able to be benefiting from, I've written a book study on Doug's book, as well as worked on the Student Ambassador Guide, and there's many other resources there that you can access.
Perfect. And then you mentioned Nest. Is that also on there that people could, you said anybody could join? Is that information on there too?
Yes, you can look for all of the monthly meetings, the next one upcoming in September.
Okay, perfect. Lina, how about you? How could people follow your work?
Yeah, so you can also find me on LinkedIn. You can follow us, and I say us, me and Josie. Josie is my 2-year-old golden retriever therapy dog.
Aww.
And so we have josie.the.therapy.dog, Josie the Therapy Dog, on Instagram. You can also go on the ISCA page, International School Counseling Association. I'm a task force member, so you'll find me on there as well. You'll also find me, I'm an online counselor for Linden, Global Services for Students. So if you want to refer me to somebody or for someone to work with me, then you can go to my bio there. And I will be creating a website soon because my focus is going on suicide prevention, which I'll talk to you guys more about some other time. But I'm creating a suicide prevention program for international schools. And we'll have a website and all that running soon.
Fantastic.
It's so terrific that you're both finding ways to communicate to the greater community, whether it be through a blog or a website, connected to what you've shared today. And what's so awesome is we're going to learn more about how to bring the SPAN program to the student level with your ambassadorship program in our next episode. I really appreciate that student connection because in our world today, we know the data shows that our students, our youth, are struggling. And also many adults are struggling as well with our information overloaded world. There's so many troubling things going on. And when you're dealing with international kids and educators moving from one place to another, it's a lot to handle. And then the academic pressure on students, that adds another dimension. So thank you for your efforts. And we're going to have all of this information in our show notes. So I'm super psyched for our next episode. Thank you for taking the time today to share so much helpful information.
Yes, thank you.
Woohoo!
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all of the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
And David.
inviting you to travel,
Teach.
and connect with us.